You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I am a USA Today bestselling author with over 30 published novels and a high school English teacher. And on this week's episode, I am excited to have a resident newer to the area who has just come to the Four Corners region. And she's going to be talking about her memoir and really a lot of just fascinating, shocking, a lot of information, I think, to take in just generally. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more deeply. The book is called I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream, How an African Teen Broke Her Silence and Fought Cultural Norms to Live the American Dream. And please tell us how to pronounce your name properly at the beginning, because I know that can be a frustrating thing to always have to explain that.
I know, and that's okay. I'm okay with that as well. It's Nyajuok Doluony.
Thank you so much. And tell us a little bit about who you are and how you ended up in this area, because it's very far from where you started.
It is. It is very far. I came to Farmington about 10 months now. We moved here in June of 2024. And my family and I, my 3 children, are here because of a job relocation. San Juan Regional Medical Center has recruited me to come work for them. So I am the cardiologist service line director right now here. But as you know in the book, I came all the way from Africa. Not all the way from Africa to Farmington, but I mean...
yeah, a lot of stops in between.
yeah, a lot of stops. But that's what brought us here.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad they're recruiting great people to come in. We certainly have a need for it in this area for more medical providers. So we're glad to have you here for that.
Thank you.
And glad to have you here on the show. This is a memoir, and it's structured a little bit differently. Everybody kind of approaches memoir, I think, in their own personal way that makes sense for their story. So tell us a little bit about just the 2-minute overview of what you wanted to share.
This is my first book, so I really don't know how a memoir is supposed to be written. I just wrote it. And as you read it, there is back and forth about what happened. But it's basically about my family and our journey from Africa, from South Sudan and being in a refugees camp, and from refugees camp to America, and some of the challenges we face here in America as new immigrants and also living in the refugees camp. So overall, it has a lot to do with the title is I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream, and it's from my perspective and my life story, but really about also watching my mother raise 7 kids in a refugees camp and then coming to America not knowing English, and the mental health that some of my family member and myself include a struggle with, and the marriage challenges. As in the title indicates, some of the norms, one of the norms that kind of led me wrote about this book was arranged marriage. I had arranged marriage here in America when I was 14. So now I'm 40. I'm like, okay, it's time to talk about that. And some of the things that American system doesn't know that immigrants still deal with even when they here in America. You know, some of those practices and norms are still being practiced underneath the system. And that's definitely what I went through, is having that arranged marriage, even though I was still young for the law of America. But it was part of our culture. And that's one of the centerpiece of the book.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that there's a difficult balance between maintaining culture as someone who's come to a new area with the legal system of wherever you're at. And sometimes those don't match up. And so it's like, okay, how do we preserve culture? But also, are there times when we need to look at some of those cultural practices and reevaluate, is this a good thing to continue? As you experienced, we'll get into it more. That's rough on a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah. But, at that time, I knew it was wrong, and I wanted to do the things my friends, my age at the time, were doing. But at the same time, too, I understood because I came from Africa. I was 13, so I already knew at that point what our cultures entail, So it's not like I was surprised or shocked. I was not. I just wanted to experience something different.
Well, and one of the things that I found interesting about your style of writing is that it's a conversation with the reader.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really cool way to approach it because it's like we're talking. Like, I feel like I've already had a good conversation with you through reading the book. And so it feels very personal. And I think that really draws the reader in to understand a little bit more. Because I think, a lot of these experiences are things that are very foreign to people who've grown up in U.S. society. But the way you connect with the reader through that conversational style brings it to a more personal level that I think really helps with that understanding and gives people a better sense of like, yes, this is a very different experience from maybe what most of us have had. But I think that's a great thing about literature is that you get to see other people's lives, whether memoir like this or, fictional stories, and put yourself in that place and really think, what would I do in that situation? How do you stand up to a family, a culture, when you don't have a lot of outside support? You had your community here and your family, but outside of that, I imagine that was very difficult to talk to other people who weren't familiar with what you were going through.
It's a very common response. People feel like after reading the book, I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream, they feel like they know me. And that's what I want them to feel, right? I want them to feel like they know me. And the thing about the book is you put as much as you want in the book and you keep as much as you want private. I get that response a lot. And I'm pleased to know that people connect with me that way. So this book is the first memoir written in my culture from a woman perspective. And as you know, I put a lot in there, right? So we have a generation that, like I said, I came when I was 13. So now I have, my age group have children that are either early 20s or teenagers. And these kids were born here in America. They've never been back home. They don't know so much about what their parents went through. So when they read my book, I'm partnered with some school in the Midwest and they read the book, they come to me and they said, I feel like I know my mom now. Or I feel like I understand what life was like for them in the refugee camp because they don't tell me. But now reading my book, I feel like I know. So they thank you for that. So I think that's really important. And also my readers that are not South Sudanese, they relate with the book, whether from the mental health perspective, the struggle I had at, going through divorce, as a woman with young children contemplating divorce, all of that stuff, or also my military background. When I first wrote the book, I didn't think it would connect with a bigger audience, but I was really surprised that we are, as human, we relate in so many levels. I held my story for so long, never share with anyone because I was afraid I can't relate. Nobody will relate to me. But after I share it, I realized a lot of people can relate to it, Yeah, that was surprising.
A lot of the locations and circumstances might be different. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the emotion that you experience and that you share through your stories are universal.
Yep, that's correct.
That fear, that struggle with how do you work within a family group, especially when family and culture are so closely tied together.
Yeah.
That's often not easy to have your voice heard when everything is already set. That's how it is. That's how we do things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to be, especially a young woman, trying to speak up and have a voice in a culture that doesn't always hear those voices. We unfortunately have plenty of cultural groups and situations where that has been true throughout history and is still true today in a lot of places. So I think there's so much with your story that people can relate to. And I wanted to start off with probably the part that is most foreign of growing up in a refugee camp. That is a small number of people who have experienced that. And I was really intrigued by a lot of your descriptions of it, because you don't describe it as like, oh, this was this horrible time in our lives. It was awful. And we probably think, people who have not experienced that, oh, that sounds like an awful experience to be away from your home, displaced, not having what you need. But you actually have a lot of really kind of wonderful, sweet memories of that time and the relationships that your family developed in that time. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that first.
It was the best time of my life. I was young. My family moved to the refugees camp in Ethiopia when I was 3. So 10 years of my life, all my childhood memory was from that environment, that refugees camp. And it's important, right? That development stage is all. Even now, when I think about home, I think about that refugees camp is where I want to go back to. It's home to me. And I also think one of the reasons is I didn't know any better then. I didn't know electricity exists. I didn't know there could be such as running water in a house, can use a shower. None of that exists. And because it was not possible in my mind, it didn't really disturb my environment at that time, I was happy playing in the river. I was happy, walking to school for miles. And I do remember having a really good time there. The food situation was hard. Yes, it was difficult. Even I knew at that time having to wait for the UN to bring food every 15 days. But other than that, life was simple.
Well, and you share a lot about your mom and what your mom experienced and the work she did to keep all of you safe and fed to the best of her ability. And even though at times during the book you talk about conflicts that you and your mom had in your relationship of trying to overcome certain things, that seemed like that was very formative for you personally to see what your mom went through and sacrificed in order to take care of her kids. And that's kind of a theme that comes up throughout of you trying to make the best choices for the benefit of your children and what you're going through. And that's a really hard thing to balance. And you faced a lot of challenging situations. But that aspect of what you shared of seeing your mom go through things and come through it, and her strength in facing a lot of the challenges that she did, really seemed to have a very deep impact on you.
I don't know how many people can say that they are who they are today because of their mothers. I can certainly say I am who I am today because of my mother. Watching her through all the struggles. She birthed 3 kids in that refugees camp. And there's no stable food, nothing. They had to go collect firewood just to come cook or go work at restaurants where they pay her $2 the whole day, bringing water. I watch all of that. It was different because traditionally in my village back in South Sudan, men farm. They bring the food and then the women cook the food. In the refugees camp, that provider part was taken away from the men. The UN bring the food. There's no farming. There's nowhere for the men to bring anything to eat. So the women have to, when the UN is not able to bring the food, they also have to be the one to go out and get some food somewhere, somehow, whether selling clothes, selling dry woods, selling charcoals. They have to find ways to feed their children. So I watched my mom do all of that for 10 years. As much as this book is from my perspective and my life story, it is so much about my mom and what she did to bring us up to where we are today.
She supports you through a lot of challenging situations, even when the rest of your family did not. When you get pregnant with your oldest child, unfortunately didn't have a very positive reaction from your family, but your mom, which I imagine was difficult for her and took a lot of bravery to take you to the appointments, to be there in ways that the rest of the family was not willing to do. And even though you describe a lot of tension during that time in your family, having that bit of support from your mom to, I imagine, the best that she could do in the situation, with probably lots of other influences on her as well about what she should or shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And that kind of seemed to help put you on a path to figuring out what you're going to do, because you were very young.
I was
and
16.
That's so hard.
I was 16, pregnant, in high school. I was working. I don't know if I added in the book. There's a part where my mom used to go. I was working about maybe a mile away from the house. And when it was time for me to get off work, she would walk to go get me from work, and we would walk back home together. This was in Omaha, Nebraska. I was not pregnant at the time, but even during my pregnancy, she would walk. There was no car. She would come pick me up by foot, and we would walk home together. When I had my daughter, she moved into my bedroom for weeks so that she can wake me up at night to feed my baby. I was 17 at the time when I had her. So the support of a mother, I don't know. I'm a mom now, but I don't know if I give that much love and support to my children like my mom did.
Throughout your story, there's strong elements of family throughout it, whether in conflict or support. And that ties very closely to, as you brought up earlier, mental health. And with everything that your family has gone through on the larger scale, and then some of the other things that you get into in the book, a lot of trauma to try to figure out how to deal with and overcome. And now we have more resources available, but that has not been true for most of forever. And especially for men. Men are generally, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of men are more reluctant to seek mental health assistance or therapy or medication. Culturally, that has been looked down on in the past. And I think we're starting to get to a point where that's a little bit more freely discussed and accepted and encouraged to discuss and reach out. But you not only experienced mental health issues that you had to seek help for, and thankfully that was there for you. But that was something even, reading the book and seeing as you're growing up, seeing some of your other family members who had no access, really had no way to know how to work through the traumas that they had experienced. And that seemed to have a pretty profound effect on the relationship.
You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Relationships within the family that kind of ripples out over time.
I think one of the most profound message that came out of the book when I was on tour in 2022 was the mental health discussion within my community. Because you think America is so open-minded and the people are receptive to a lot of things. But mental health, as you know, it's still very, very not discussed enough. And so much so in my community because of who we are and how much so many things are considered taboo. So mental health is such a taboo in my community, even for those that are here in America. So during my book, me talking about my own mental health and my brother's mental health, it brought up a lot of open discussion that I am proud of, that people are continue to talk about and seek help. I highly encourage it. 2019, 2020, I was in such a bad state of mind that I don't think if it wasn't for the mental health counseling and the treatment that I went through, I don't know if I would be here. I was in such a dark place, but I'm grateful for the military services that took care of me at that time. It took 2 years of therapy for me, intensive. It's called IOP. I was in intensive outpatient therapy. I was an inpatient also for a while. And I continued to see my therapist for 2 years, once a week. Being where I am right now with clarity and more healthy mentally, I highly credit that to the time and I was able to seek mental health.
As I was reading your book, I was also listening to Kristen Hanna's book, The Women, about nurses in Vietnam and just the effect that had on nurses. And then a big portion of the book is when the character is home and trying to deal with the trauma. And she goes to the VA multiple times asking for help because she gets to the point where she's drinking constantly, pills. I mean, she can't process her trauma. She doesn't know how. And they turn her away. And they say, "You're not a soldier. This is not for you." Basically, they said there were no women in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And they just completely disregarded the fact fact that, some of the stuff that's described in the book, like, it's awful.
But we know now trauma can be secondhand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was listening to that, and like, it just is awful the way that people were treated. And so it was so nice to read your book, and I was like, oh, that has changed.
Yes.
There's much more support for mental health, and
there is.
especially for women.
Yeah, so much so. My brother got out of the military in 2005, and at that time, he didn't even have help. But from his period of deployment, those soldiers that came out around that time were the one that we started to recognize the importance of mental health, because they suffer. And it was because of all the suicide they were going through, the in and out of the hospital, that the government finally say, okay, so maybe we need to implement some programs. And that's when the resiliency came out. So I became a product of that time when it was accepted to say, I need a mental health counselor right now.
Well, it's amazing to see how long that has taken, because a lot of those Vietnam veterans, that was when they started paying attention then and seeing the suicides. And that's when the diagnosis of PTSD even became a thing. Like, that wasn't something anybody like really had an awareness of. And all the way from that time up until after your brother
That's a long
leaves
time.
the military. That's such a long time for it to be like, well, like, yeah, we see there's some sort of problem, but to actually get everything in place, taking up until the second decade of the 2000s, where you're like, wow, like, it's really shocking to realize how long it's taken for people to be able to have the support that they need to deal with mental health issues. I mean, particularly in the military, when you're exposed to traumatic events, either in person if you're, in combat, or dealing with the tangential effects of that and being in support or, medical care. Like, it's hard to imagine seeing all of the wounded and traumatized soldiers come back and not be traumatized yourself by that. I mean, that's really hard to work in that environment day in and day out.
We have come a long way to recognize that PTSD can be a secondhand exposure. It took a long time, even just witnessing car accident on the road. You could still develop PTSD from that. So we have a long way to go, but I think we have come a long way as well.
It is really good to see that improvements being made and that more people are getting help and support. And one of the things toward the end of the book that you discuss getting involved with is within the Sudanese culture of letting more voices come out and talking about rape and arranged marriages and abuse and being able to speak up more. And that's something that I could tell you've become very passionate about and been involved in. And it's something that for any community where those voices are being held back and suppressed, there needs to be those first few brave people who are willing to speak out and draw attention to it. So tell us a little bit more about that movement and just how you got involved.
That was the beginning of the book, actually. They were the reason I wrote the book. It was June of 2021 when COVID was just starting. And I find myself in a group that was all of a sudden open overnight. It was called ROS, Girls Breaking the Silence. ROS standing for Republic of South Sudan. And it was young girls from Midwest, mainly from South Dakota and Omaha, but they all were in Twitter, and they were being interviewed like this by three young men. It was a podcast, and one of the girls opened up about her being raped. And she said, I was raped, and one of the person that raped me was in this group, the three men that were interviewing her. And the support that she received from that podcast, so many young men supported her, they encouraged her, they condemned that act. And then other young girls under the tweet also start talking about their own experiences with the drugs, with being raped, with being molested, all of that stuff. And within 24 hours, they moved from Twitter and they brought it to Facebook. I'm not a big on Twitter. So one of the young girls, I know her personally, she said, I think we should take this to Facebook where our parents are. They need to see this. Because these are kids that were born in America. They're in their early 20s. They don't talk about this. And when they do, they are being told, we don't talk about this. So when they brought it to Facebook, I found myself added in that. We know each other, but its community is small enough. They add me to that, and it took me 2 days to I was just demoralized. I was crying. And at that point, too, I was in the peak of my own depression and PTSD. And all of that just flooded in, I cried and cried. I was listening to their videos. I was listening to their opening up about all these things that the community had been hiding for years. I opened up in the group, Ross Girls, and I made a 3-minute video and I said, I have a story. I said, I heard you guys. I'm with you. I support you. I also have a story. It's not about rape, but I had an arranged marriage. And from that 3-minute video, I started receiving calls all over the world, South Sudanese in Africa, in Australia, in Canada. These women, and this group is all women. It's a very private group. And they start sharing their own stories with me. And that was also very hard. And then after listening to that, I said, okay, I need to do more. So I made a video, a bigger video, and I detailed all my arranged marriage, the emotional toll that I was going through at that time. From the time I was, 14 until 18-ish, I listed all. And that video went to my family. So my dad got a hold of it and my brother got a hold of it. And that's how it all started. My dad told me that I should stop talking about this because it's been over 20 years and that it will pretty much, it's going to slow me growing as a person and that I need to stop. I went back to my therapist and I told him that I need to help this group. They're going through a lot of mental health issues. I didn't know what to do. At this point, I was still seeking my counseling on a regular basis. One thing he said, Nyajuok, when somebody in your position go outside of themselves to help somebody else, it's a sign of healing. And I had been seeing this guy now for a year. He said, it's a sign of healing. You are healing. So what do you need me to do? I said, you come with me online. We're going to do some live video about mental health. So every week we would do a session on depression, what it is, how to recognize it, how to cope with depression. The next time we would do PTSD. What is PTSD? How do you recognize it? And all that stuff. So we did it for the whole entire summer of 2021. And then I decided to share my story. I initially went to the group and I said, if you guys want to write your stories, want to put them in a book, because at this point, many of them had already shared in this little group. And I said, if you guys want to collect it, put it in a book, I am willing to put it together. But you know what? They all said no.
Not quite ready.
They were not ready. And I said, okay, I will share mine. And hopefully one day you guys will be confident enough. You'll be ready to also share your story. And that's how this book came about. I was initially sharing it for that little group. But when the book was published, I didn't know it was going to be so much well read.
There's a lot of people who have maybe not necessarily similar stories, although it sounds like there are plenty who do, but who have stories that they want to share.
Yeah.
But they're scared. It's hard to open up. It's hard to admit things to yourself, let alone then bring them out publicly, because sometimes people cannot be very nice. And it's hard to imagine that you're going to get support when maybe if your life has not given you that support in the first place. That's a big step to take.
Yeah, it is. And so it's a mixed feeling because I have a lot of supporters that love the book. They just love and want to share, and they tell me how much they appreciate me opening up. But I also have truly people in my community that want me to disappear for talking about the things that I talked about. They don't see it as a womanly wife materials, I think that's the word now, or mother should talk about those things. So yes, it's hard, but I do know it has changed a life or two somewhere. So it's worth it, but it's still even hard right now. It's not accepted by everyone.
What would your advice be to someone who has a personal story that they want to share, but they are facing potentially, negative reactions from family or community? What would your recommendations be on facing that or how to go about it?
I think it's important to get a support system. I can recognize 3 people in my life that supported me during this process, that pushed me to publishing this book. I don't think if they were not in places where they were in my life, I probably would have not published the book. One was my therapy, for sure. I think I was mentally preparing for this without knowing when I was taking those counseling sessions. The second person was my brother. When I finished writing the book, before I sent it to the editor, I sent all the copies to my siblings. They are all adult now. Our youngest is 25. So I sent each one of them a copy of it. And I said, read it. They knew I was writing a book at this point, but I wanted their opinion. And my brother called me and he said, publish it. This is my older brother. I respect him. I trust him. He supported me. I know in the book, we have issues, but but he became a support system for me. When he told me to publish the book, it gave me the push that I needed. He said, there is nothing in that book that is fabricated. You didn't lie about anything. He said, if you want to publish it, publish it. And I knew at that point, even if my dad was against it, which he was, that my brother would be there with me and he would support me. So that was a huge support for me. Another person was my editor. She became a friend, a mentor. In the few months, maybe even few weeks before the book was to be published, I called her and I said, I'm nervous. I don't know if I'm ready. She prayed with me and she said, you're ready. Publish it. He said, this book is going to change lives. Publish it. So those were the things that I think God put in my life to make sure this book come out. So if somebody is in the fence, they need somebody to support them. Maybe share their story with somebody before they write it. Maybe write it. I would say write it and the time of it will come. And it will be perfect. It will mend for somebody somewhere. So that would be my advice, is write your story. Maybe this year or next year is not the time to publish it, but the time will come to publish it and you will be in the right place with the right people at that time.
Thank you for sharing that. I think having that support system is so important, and especially if you're worried about negative consequences of it, having that backup really makes a big difference. Well, we are already out of time. We barely scratched the surface of everything you talk about in your book. But please tell people where they can find you and find out more about the book.
And thank you for having me. Truly, thank you. So the book is on Amazon. I Am My Mother's Wildest Dream. I prefer that people get it from my website. There's a lot of reason. I can sign it if they get it from my website and I can mail it out. So there's a little personal touch to it. And my website is I Am Nyajuok. It's kind of a little hard, but if you just type in the name of the book, you click on it, my website will come up and it's under the shop and then the book will come up and you can purchase from there. I will make sure that it's signed, put in a little cute box. So those are the two places that people can find it. And here in Farmington, I almost forgot, the bookstore.
That's where I got mine from.
You got it from the bookstore. Yes. Here in Farmington, they can go downtown and get it from Quill and Quest. And those books are also signed.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. And thank you for sharing your story and helping others to realize that they're not alone and that they may, at some point, be able to share their story as well.
I hope so. There's so much to sharing your story. It releases you from whatever that was holding you back. And also it helps somebody else out there that they're not alone.
Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Sheree.